Good evening. It is, oh boy, 3 seconds to 6 o'clock. So I can't start yet. Sorry, I thought it said 6. Gotta follow the rules, everyone, right? Oh, here it goes. I did it. Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Council Chambers on Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, identify possible conflicts of interest. Seeing none, moving on to item D, public comment period correspondence. At this time, I'll recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the public. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the public, first stating the name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any public comments? Are there any public comments this evening? Public comments going a third time? Seeing none, we'll move on to item E, approval of minutes, September 10th, 2024. We have a motion by Alderman Weigel, second by Alderman Giles. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item F, staff updates.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple, and they both relate to recent meetings of committees and items that are on your consent agenda. The first one is it's item K68 on the consent agenda. It's from the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee. It comes along with a recommendation to revise an agreement with ADRC for the use of the Second Street Community Center. Currently, ADRC does have, they provide, meals there, but they've been doing their Meals on Wheels from the Cedar Rail facility. So they would like to move into the Second Street Community Center. The committee was favorable to that. Subsequently, there's been some discussion about a possible fee or charge to that. And so the thought maybe is that an agreement shorter than 5 years could be put into place in order to allow time for that discussion to continue, possibly a 1-year agreement. This body can decide if they want to pull it off. Right now, it is scheduled to be approved as a 5-year agreement with ADRC, but I wanted to note that conversation and that possible compromise, if you will, with respect to that compensation issue. The other thing I want to mention to you is relates to item K7A, which is the one item under the Plan Commission on the consent agenda. That relates to a conditional use permit at 714 North Juneau Avenue. The commission did recommend approval of that conditional use permit, but they did ask that the city attorney take a look at it and see if he had any concerns. A city attorney has done that, and he's found nothing that he believes that would be necessarily a public concern. What was being asserted is potential private issue with a condominium agreement that this individual lives in. But so there's nothing that would seem to stop you from approving that item in the consent calendar if you see fit. That's all I have for staff updates, and I'm not aware of any other staff members wishing to address the council tonight.
Thank you, Steve. Item G, mayor's comments. My first comment is going to be, in case you missed the last council meeting, Ed Wagner has resigned from District 5 council member. I contacted Ed and he gave me permission to read this. He's a very humble man. I wanted to share something about Ed that touched me. Ed, you have been the best mentor I could ever hope for. Even if we disagree, we were always all right. Your knowledge and skills far exceed anything that anyone could ever have offered. The things I learned from you, there are not enough words to describe. The respect I have for you will be ongoing. Thank you again, Ed, for all your years of service. The second item, Friday, September 20th, was a badge pinning ceremony, which I was able to attend. Congratulations, Fire Chief Everett Mueller, Deputy Fire Chief Brian Barnes, Lieutenant Nate McNamara, and First Engine Lucas Freidenlund. The pride of Marshfield keeps moving forward. Thank you, gentlemen, and congratulations on your new positions. The third item is from Marshfield Utilities. Congratulations, John Rickman, on receiving the George Fuller Award. Also, Marshfield Utilities has been honored through the Wisconsin AWWA with the Utility Achievement Award for their PFOA/PFAS treatment project. Again, congratulations to all, and thank you. And there ends my report. Next, item H, council comments. Seeing no comments, we'll move on to item I, City Administrator's Update.
Thank you, Mayor. First, a note about the next time we get together at the council level will be on Tuesday, October 8th. That will be a different type of setup for us. 5 o'clock will be the first budget meeting, and 7 p.m., an hour later than normal, will be the regular council meeting. So that's Tuesday, October 8th. The meetings will be 5 o'clock budget and 7 o'clock regular council. Also, on that meeting on the 8th, the regular council meeting, we will have Dale Christensen here. That was a request from Councilmember Barshow. He'll be giving a report on the 2024 Central Wisconsin State Fair, letting us know how it went and how some of the numbers turned out from that event. And also, we will have someone from the Marshfield Clinic Health System and to present an update from that facility. And as part of it, they've indicated they probably will be giving us an update on how things are going with Sanford on the merger that's going through as we speak. Also want to note that there'll be a couple of other things. I'll be giving updates on previous council requests at that meeting on the 8th. And that will include items that I think we've had on our list here for a little bit. So that's really all I've got at this point. Thank you for the update, the opportunity to make the update.
Thank you. Item J, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none, moving on to item K, consent agenda. We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Tompkins. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. And we can exclude item L because there's no action moved from consent agenda. Item M, election of utility commissioner for a citizen appointment for a 7-year term on the Marshfield Utilities Commission presented by myself. Election of member to a 7-year term on the Marshfield Utilities Commission, Gabrielle Falke and Kathy Lotzer. Ms. Lotzer was given an opportunity to introduce herself as she was not able to be here at the September 10th meeting. Kathy, would you like to step up and give us a little summation of why you'd like to be on the commission, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Kathy Lotzer. I reside at 1209 East 21st Street in Marshfield. I was born and raised in Marshfield. Your packets include my letter of interest, which details my work experience and knowledge. And rather than review that information with all of you because you've had it for a month already, what I would like to do is address a comment made by Mr. Stauber 2 weeks ago regarding prohibiting certain former employees from sitting on boards and commissions. I can assure you all I have no hidden agenda or, you cannot hear me? Okay, would you like me to start over? Or?
No.
No, okay. I can assure you all I have no hidden agenda. My motives are quite simple. I had an amazing career at Marshfield Utilities. I learned a great deal, and I see this open seat position as an opportunity for me to finally give back to that organization and this community that has been so good to me and my family for so many years. It's really just that simple. Now, I understand that not everybody that applies for a seat on a board has pure motives. And however, rather than eliminating the opportunities for former employees, perhaps you ought to consider a vetting process for all candidates. Vetting is a simple, straightforward process that can uncover any conflicts of interest and also determine if a candidate is a good fit and suitable to serve. Again, this is something that should be done for all candidates. I think we can agree that finding volunteers to serve in different capacities today is very difficult. So doesn't it make more sense to encourage all of our citizens to serve when opportunities arise, especially when they have an interest, and use the vetting process to try to eliminate those that aren't a good fit? But by creating a blanket policy or an ordinance, you are systematically eliminating an entire group of citizens just because of where they worked at one point in time in their career. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I need a motion to accept both of these young ladies. Alderman O'Reilly, you make a motion to accept both? Alderman Weigel?
I second.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Seeing other nominations, nominations are closed. Now we will pass out some ballots. Oh, okay. Vote to accept the nomination, and that would be
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion,
No. I wanted to make a comment after that. I can't buzz in, so I was hoping to make a comment quickly, or possibly a suggestion.
is that right to do that?
I guess so. I don't know.
So just once again, and I know I've been this guy before, so I'm gonna be that guy again. We have later in the agenda, the issue of a policy potentially disqualifying candidates from positions if they've been employed previously or whatever that is. Would it not be prudent to discuss that first and address that prior to voting on this?
Actually, by ordinance, or I'm sorry, by statute, you have to elect this position tonight.
Okay. Well, could we have that discussion first and then?
No.
We cannot?
No.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, please fill out your ballots.
Mr. Werman, your selection?
I just named my selection,
Yes.
Gabrielle Falke.
And Mrs. Spiros, your selection?
Gabrielle.
These guys. Thank you both for coming forward and helping me not to search out. The last time we had to do this, I had to find 6 different people for different committees. So, and yes, Kathy, I agree. Everyone should have a chance to do this. Our new person on Marshfield Utilities will be Gabrielle Falke. So thank you again very much. Presentation, City's Code Enforcement Practices, Procedures, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me get set up here. I'm going to get a nice size. Thanks, Dane. Well, thank you. I was asked to do a report, or somebody from staff to do a report on code enforcement. Councilmember O'Reilly brought this up, I think, early this summer. And as I stand in front of you tonight, I realized that I gave this report a little over 4 years ago, but less than half the body that's here now was part of that presentation. So refresh it a little bit, and I want to walk through this with you tonight. Code enforcement is something that we don't talk a lot about at these meetings, but I'm told that many of you get a lot of calls and emails about this, maybe more than other subjects. People have junk in their yards, neighbors are unhappy, junk cars, weeds overgrowing yards and affecting people's enjoyment of their own property. So it's an important conversation, even if we don't talk about it a lot. I want to walk through how we do things, what some of the rules are, and who's responsible for some of the different enforcement. So first of all, code enforcement is a very broad category. It means a lot of different things. You know, we talk about sometimes how there's a lot of people involved with economic development. We talk about Mackey and Main Street and CDA and Visit Marshfield and the city and others. There's a lot of different players in code enforcement as well, which maybe confuses people. If it's a weed complaint, it goes to the street division. If it's a complaint about maybe junk vehicles or junk in the yard, it'll go to our zoning administrators. If it's about buildings deteriorating, falling down, whatever, it'll go to the building inspection division. There's a lot of different places that some of these, and sometimes trying to coordinate all these is a little bit challenging to make sure that we can address multiple parts of a complaint. So tonight I want to talk about the process a little bit and address any questions or concerns that the mayor and council might have. Okay, first of all, our intent is to do a few things. First of all, we want to respond to all complaints in a timely manner. That's an important thing. People complain. I will tell you, and I probably say it more than once tonight, in the spring and early summer, we get deluged with complaints. People are coming out of their homes, they're out there working in their yards, they're looking across the street and saying, wait a minute, why am I trying to upgrade my yard if the person across the street has just, got a junk pile? So we get a lot more, give us a little bit of grace during the April through June time period in responding, but we do try to respond to all complaints as quickly as we can. We work with property owners. The goal is we want to get them to comply. Do we write tickets? Yep. And go into court? Yep. Have we had issues where we've tried to have even more significant action taken, like raising a building, a shed that's falling down? Yep. That's not our goal, though. That's the last line of defense. We work to try and get compliance without that when we can. Citations and fines happen, but our goal, again, is compliance. That's what we're after. So here's an example of some complaints. Development Services Department, they handle things like deteriorating buildings and fences, and illegal home occupations. That comes up periodically. Get calls, I even get these myself sometimes. Somebody's running a business out of their garage. Is that acceptable? Well, you have to look into what it is. Are there issues of noise, traffic, parking? Do they have, if they need a special permit for it, for the level of activity that they're doing, do they have that permit? All those things come into play. Ordinance enforcement, or as I called it earlier, zoning administration. Again, if you don't know, we have Bob Larson and Kayla Wolf as co-zoning administrators. They're also ordinance enforcement officers. They do a great job for us, and their topics are oftentimes things like junk cars. And again, what's a junk car? I had a 2005 Saturn that people would have called junk a while ago that I don't own anymore. That's not what it means. What it means is either obviously inoperable and or unlicensed. The theory being if you can't get in a car and drive it down the road legally, it probably is a problem. And I think I was able, for quite a while, to drive my 2005 Saturn down the road, so I didn't qualify. Also, outside storage materials, and that is the idea that you can't just store anything in your yard. If you look at the code, you'll find references to outside storage materials in your yard. We want to have those in garages or out of sight for the most part. And then Public Works, the street division deals with high grass and weeds. They also deal in the winter with ice and snow removal from our sidewalks, which is very important. We give people 24 hours. That doesn't mean we're out there at 24 hours and 1 minute. But it does mean that we follow up on those to make sure that the sidewalks that people are responsible for have been salted, cleared, to keep people from having injuries, not being able to use the walkways, those types of things. Complaint handling process. Well, they come to us through a variety of methods. I get emails and phone calls from members of the council that one of your constituents has brought up a problem property. We get phone calls directly. We get emails directly from people. We find out about them sometimes in just random ways. What we do is we get inspections conducted by the appropriate staff. That's our first goal, to get it to the right staff person, get him out there to look at it, him or her, and see if there are, in fact, any violations of city code. Then we give them time to comply, and that depends on the circumstances. Now, this may make people kind of scratch their heads, but if somebody's got a really, really large problem, I mean, they've allowed their yard to become a kind of pretty bad, we're not going to just give them a week. We're going to work with them. We're going to give them a fair amount of time, but then we're going to hold them to that. Maybe we're going to give them, 3-4 weeks. But our goal is to make sure that they sign on to the fact that they are going to complete the process, clean it up. If not, then we'll move on to the next step. But we do try to work with people when we can. And health and safety is the most important thing. If anything is a health and safety issue, we're more attuned to it. Things that might create serious health issues in a neighborhood are higher prioritized. It doesn't mean that other violations aren't important too, but certainly we want to make sure that we're taking care of our citizens. What are our options if there's no voluntary compliance? Well, in the case of what I mentioned with the street division, they just act. They can mow lawns and bill the person. And if they don't pay, then it goes on to their taxes as a special charge. If they don't clear the ice and snow off the sidewalks, we'll go in and do it. And then they'll get billed, and if they don't pay it, will go on to their taxes as a special charge. That is a fairly active thing that we do, but that's based upon what we're allowed to do for those types of violations. In a lot of things I mentioned before, junk cars and junk in the yard and those types of problems, we'll issue a citation. The case is sent to municipal court. Municipal court meets right here in this room where we are every month. Judge Cruz sits up where Mayor T-Strake is, and they go through the case. And sometimes a person will plead guilty, oftentimes they won't, and they'll set them up for a pretrial or a trial. And then the next step is staff and the city attorney will seek other legal remedies if necessary. Now, I'm going to say this fairly directly, not just to the council and the mayor, but also to anybody who might be listening to me or seeing this meeting on live or on the rerun, if you will. Just because you don't see something happening doesn't mean it's not. We've brought people into this room before with multiple citations. They pled not guilty. They've been set up for pretrial. They've still been maintaining that they're not responsible. They go to trial, they get convicted. The judge might say, well, I'll give you 3 more months to clean it up. If you don't, then you're going to get a higher fine. All those things are good. We work toward getting the thing resolved. But as a result, if you're sitting at home, you're thinking, wait a minute, I called on this back in April. Now it's August. City Hall doesn't even care about my complaint. Don't take that. It's a process that we're required to go through. And once it comes into municipal court, we don't have a whole lot of control about the timeline sometimes. So we keep pushing. City Attorney Hap Wolfgram is wonderful in helping us, but sometimes these things take time to get resolved, especially if they're larger issues in nature. Common challenges. Oftentimes complainants are not sure who to contact. That's a hard go. I'm going to talk a little bit later about getting onto our website and how you can just file a complaint fairly easily at our website. We do tell people, do anything though. Call a staff person, call a council member, they can refer them to city staff. Stop in and see us, whatever it takes to let us know that you have a concern. I mentioned before, staff time may be limited in the spring and summer. I've actually done the job in my previous career, or in my career earlier, that Bob and Kayla do. And I know that in that spring and early summer, we have a lot of complaints to deal with. A lot of people unhappy with their neighbors or something that they see when they drive around. So give us, again, a little bit of grace during that time. Compliance can be an up and down ride. Again, and this might kind of make people wonder too. Somebody might clean up, resolve the issue, but then, a month or two later, you drive back again and it's happening again. I want people to know that doesn't mean we didn't do anything. We maybe don't start from square one the second time, but we have to come back and try and get resolution a second time. So sometimes we have those battles that we have to go through. Sometimes the code isn't always clear sometimes. We've had this with the sign code recently. We're working on some improvements to our sign code. And we also try to improve our other codes when things seem a little bit cloudy in terms of what the words even mean. Property in transition, I put this down because sometimes the property will no longer be in the hands of a person who lives in that home, might be in the hands of a bank or a finance company going through transition, might be repossessed, might be the county's going to take it over. Sometimes getting somebody to take care of the problem is even hard to find who's responsible at a given time, but we pursue that hard. I mentioned before multi-department complaints that we have to work to coordinate. Maybe a person calls about weeds, a falling down shed, junk car. I mean, these are all going to be handled by different people, but we try to coordinate to the best of our ability. Enforcement limits, I mentioned managing expectations. I want the public to know that they're heard, that we're pursuing all their complaints, but again, some of these things might take a little time to get to final resolution. And then sometimes complainants want to remain anonymous. And, I'm not saying that's not possible, but, the reason we want to know who somebody is is we want to be able to get back to them and say, hey, look, we went out there, it's not a violation. And not have them wondering about it. And nobody even drove by. Yeah, we did. But what we saw is not something that the city code addresses. So we want to try and be helpful to people who call in as best we can too. So filing a complaint, you can go onto our website. If you get onto our website homepage, you hit services button, and then you hit citizen complaints. And there's actually a form you can fill out. I did it today, pretending to complain on my own house. And it took me about, maybe a minute at most to complete that form. You can obviously contact staff or your elected representative. If you contact me, that'd be great. My phone and email address are on the city's website. I will not handle it myself. What I will do is make sure it gets in the right hands of a staff person who can address your concern. And obviously you can come and speak at public comment during meetings. We would generally ask if someone is listening to me right now and wants to do that it be more of a broad complaint where you think we need to adopt a new ordinance that would address a bigger concern, maybe a citywide type of issue you're seeing as opposed to what your neighbor is doing. If it's a more specific concern, contact us and we'll work to get that issue resolved for you. So in summary, the city has tremendous staff. I can't say enough about them in building inspection services and the ordinance and zoning administrator officers. They do a great job. The street division is wonderful at handling weed complaints. A lot of other people get involved from time to time. There's the administrative assistants, and I think highly of them. So we have good people working to address your concerns. Again, we try to address complaints responsively and thoroughly. treat complainants and property owners fairly. Notice I said property owners. I mean, any of us someday could get a letter saying that, you know, our tabs are expired or whatever, and we need to get up to legal status with our car. But we want to be treating people professionally, properly, again, the golden rule. And then looking for municipal code changes when appropriate. And I mentioned the sign code. There are some other codes we've come across in the last year or two that we want to look at in a little bit greater depth that maybe need to be tweaked a little bit to clear up language that might be a little bit fuzzy, or to maybe put a little bit more oomph behind what we're trying to accomplish. But again, my final bullet point, the goal is code compliance, not punishment. Have we doled out punishments? Yep. I've been here for 13 and a half years. We've had people having their structures raised. You know, we've had a lot of things we've gone through, but our goal is to try and get compliance when we can, and to come up short of being in this room with the judge. And that's what I have. I'll take any questions or comments about code enforcement in any way, shape, or form.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Steve. I just want to do a shout out to the ordinance officers as well as the street department. A lot of people in my district, they actually come to me with their complaints. Maybe they don't want their name put on it. I'm not sure. So I submit a lot through this form. But everyone in both those departments have been amazing. They are so great to work with. They are so timely. It's just really made things easy. So just thank you to streets and ordinance.
Thank you. I'll pass that compliment on, and I agree with you. They do really great work day in, day out.
Any other comments, questions for Steve? Mr. O'Reilly?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Steve. Yeah, I do appreciate the staff and the touchy nature of the subjects they have to deal with the community on. I will add that contrary to what Mrs. Tompkins said, I hear a lot of the opposite, and I don't get down into the dirt and try to do my own investigations for the most part, because I don't feel that I should be doing that. I have complaints, people that are calling me complaining that some of these things have been years, and I don't know what to tell them. I don't know if it's tied up in courts. I don't know if we've given up on them. But if we are looking at issues that are 12 months old, is there something we can do at the city level to advise them what's going on? Or I think we can all acknowledge these issues are out there. I do know of a couple of them myself. So I guess where my concern lies is whether we are enforcing ordinances the same everywhere in the city. And I guess when it comes down to something like that, in my opinion, if we're not going to enforce them equally throughout the entire city, we need to get rid of them, because there is nothing more frustrating as a taxpayer than seeing something get taken care of somewhere else. But, and I understand, you know, it could be 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah.
But like I said, I know of a couple of these situations right now, and one is very close to me, and I dealt with it personally. So what do we do in those situations? And is there, if I'm not mistaken, I was told there is a tracking mechanism in the software
There is.
or in the website that maybe they could follow, and you could share that with them, because that may alleviate some of the calls to staff if they can watch them real time where they're at. I think it may be beneficial. I don't know, but like I said, when you see them out there for that long, and whatever they don't know, maybe whatever they reported is not an ordinance violation, but they don't know that. They see it's there yet, and they're just going to get angrier and angrier over time. And I don't know what our communication is with them to tell them there is not an ordinance on this, or there's just a big void I see there that can be frustrating for a lot of people. So whatever you can add in on that, I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing that. A few things. First of all, if you or anybody has specific addresses that you're concerned about, please let me know or let somebody know to make sure we can take a look at those and deal with those specifically. As far as the general thing you're talking about, do people who file complaints know what's going on? I don't do Bob and Kayla's job or Pat Kilty or a street division, but typically if a person makes a contact with us and they want to know what's going on, they want to know, is it really a violation? Can something be done? Typically the person will get back to them and say, hey, look, I was out there today. Yes, there are a few things. I'll give them a letter. They'll have 3 weeks or 2 weeks to comply or whatever. And some complainants want to have that communication, others don't. And again, sometimes we get complaints that we don't even know. I mean, we don't even know who they are necessarily, probably, but yeah, the more communication we can give to help people to understand. And like I said, sometimes I used to do this a long time ago when I was in the Twin Cities in an earlier job. And, sometimes I'd go out there and no matter what the person said to me, I'd go, you know what? I know you don't like the color of that building. I know you don't like the fact that but they have bikes sitting next to the garage, and we're not going to ticket people for having a couple of bikes sitting next to the garage. Sometimes you make those calls, and technically you could look at it and say it's outside storage, but we do need to communicate with people if they want us to. It's a good thing. So.
Could you maybe explain where that tracking mechanism is for the community to go look at the progress of these?
Yeah, I can't myself, but I think it might be through Evolve software. But I will get back to you and we'll find a way to share that out.
Alderman Stauber, I don't see it, so Jess is telling me.
Okay, thanks for the presentation, Steve. So my question's regarding the method that people log complaints, and I've used the form. I was pretty impressed with it. You give GIS and zero in exactly where the address is, and you can submit supporting photographs, which I think is helpful. But if I had one suggestion on the form, and maybe this is more Tom Laux, but it might be nice if the members of the Common Council in that district received a copy of the complaint, and that would just be, click of the mouse on that form, and we'd get a copy
If it's
of it.
in your district?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is kind of an enhancement to the form, though it may take a while. But the other one may be, and I realize that complainers can be anonymous, which I think is a nice feature. Maybe the option of giving the customer or the citizen the option to get a follow-up return call, for example. Do they just log the complaint, fill out the form and log it, and hopefully things are acted on? Or can they request that they be notified when things have been resolved? Might be a nice feature. And again, it'd just be a box to click on the form. And the last thing would be, the complainers may want to send a copy to themselves. I think once the form is completed and launched, they don't see it anymore. It just goes to, City Hall.
There's nothing for them to print off
for
themselves.
Right. Yeah.
These are all
for those, there's some of these issues like Alderman O'Reilly mentioned, they're just repeat. And I've got on my district too, and every year you get the same kind of complaint with the same person. And it'd be nice to build up that data so we know what kind of a problem we really have. And then the last thing I'll say is kind of the inconsistency of the method to file a complaint. And I've done this. I had really a non-emergent issue, and it was really for the police department. I wanted to put it on their radar. I went to the complaint form, and the only option I was given was a phone number to call. And I didn't want to bother anyone on the phone. I just wanted to log it, move on with the weekend or what have you. At least they would know about it. So looking at some of these categories like animal control, there's no form. You can call ordinance control between, the hours of 8 and 4, Monday through Friday. After hours, there's another phone number. If you have a question about assessments, there's a phone number only. It's Monday through Thursday, Friday until noon. Hornets and wasps in playgrounds. If I'm at a playground or someone's at a playground and they want to log a complaint, they could use their phone, which I just did, and log a complaint about that Saturn parked in your driveway. Snap a picture, submit the form, and be done with it, and move on. It is taking advantage of technology. Building permit issues and inquiries, just 2 phone numbers. I'm sorry, that's cemetery issues, headstone damage, just 2 phone numbers that are given. And again, a lot of these may not be urgent complaints. They just want to make someone aware of it. Noise complaints, contact the police department. There's only a phone number. And maybe, you know, another feature on the form, if it's an emergency situation, dial 911, skip the form, like they do at the Marshfield Clinic when you call. Recreation program issues, again, only a phone number. The phone is being manned from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. That's it. And a lot of people use parks and such on the weekends. Sidewalk concerns, there's, you know, the form is there and an alternate or an option for a phone number. So that's really kind of nice. But I guess my request would be that, you know, why can't we be more consistent with use of the form on all of these topics?
Yeah, I see Councilmember Werman has his hand raised too, so he might have some more questions. But I'll take what you and Councilmember O'Reilly have brought up, you know, from this video or from notes that are being taken. And every Wednesday morning after a council meeting, we get together, department and division heads over at the Second Street Community Center, and we have a kind of a debriefing meeting where we talk about what was decided at the council meeting, what we need to do about it. And we talk about other issues too. I will definitely bring this up and see if there's ways we can improve that form. I don't look at it every day by any means either. And just how we can make it easier for people to get the answers they're looking for or get the help they want.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Werman?
Yeah, freaking Stauber stole my thunder. I was all excited. I had this great idea and then had to hit the stupid hand button. That's what I get for attention. You know, I 100% agree. I literally had the same idea as Russ, and it was like, as he's going through it, I'm like checking stuff off on my paper. So I'm glad he got in there and said something as well. I think the big thing that he hit on that I really wanted to drive home here is I believe that as council members, we should be getting a report on this, whether we want to make communications go through and build in something for our districts, or we can filter it ourselves. But I think it's important for us to see it and follow up on. I don't want to make it too restrictive in the sense of we're elected officials. I think that's kind of on us to take, you know, that action and decide that we're going to reach out to these people to see if things have been resolved or reach out to the appropriate parties, so on and so forth. So I don't, if they're not anonymous, so I don't want to say like you have to do that or, you know, put that button in and then have people expect it. But I do think it would be wise of us as a council to evaluate that and start making those decisions so that they feel they have some action. Which has kind of been a theme for me tonight. I was going to put down there that in general, I think we should probably get back to focusing on the people of the city a little bit more. And this is one of the key areas we could do that. And the other thing I wanted to say about this presentation, which again, appreciate that, Steve, is just education, I think is huge. You know, we've talked about this a lot with communications in general, but like, how can we educate the city on what we're doing, what the policies are? Are we following up with them, showing them the ordinance and explaining why? I know that we're giving them results and so on and so forth, but I just want to make sure that they're our main focal point, not just getting an answer out there. And I think that's the hard part because we all get super busy. But I do think that that's the important part is making sure that they're educated on the why behind everything before we just kind of shut it down or give them what they want. So.
Yeah, really good points. And I think people we sometimes have sent letters to are confused about what they're doing wrong, or I didn't know I couldn't do this or whatever. So complainants and people who might file complaints together, both of them need to understand, you know, what we can do, what we can't do, and have that communicated to them as best we can.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Administrator Barr. Great presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item O, second reading of ordinance number 1522, prohibiting large-scale commercial animal breeding. We'll wait till Steve gets up here. No problem. I jumped the gun. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. Presented by Steve Barr, City Administrator. Oh, boy.
Talk slower, right? No, just kidding. Well, thank you. Well, this ordinance was introduced last meeting by Councilmember Giles. He brought this up before about the issue of pet stores potentially being in the market of selling dogs, for example, that are from puppy mills that have been brought up from the south or elsewhere, and the concerns about the health issues and the impact on the animals and on our community. So he'd gotten a sample, brought it to our attention, city clerk, city attorney, we all looked at it, city attorney put it in the proper form. We had first reading at the last meeting, and Peggy Mays was here at the last meeting and did a nice presentation on the broad issue with puppy mills and how that can filter into pet stores. So with that in mind, staff would recommend approval of ordinance 1522.
We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Mormon,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, Alderman Giles. Item P, request to authorize proceeding with implementation of Phase 2 of the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan and direct staff to prepare a budget resolution for approval by Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, in December of 2023, we signed an agreement with Vanderwall and Associates, our consultant, to do implementation of the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan. You may recall that they were the ones who worked with us to develop that plan back in 2022. So the intent was, even though we signed an agreement for the entire project, we only authorized, council only authorized Phase 1 work to be done at a maximum of $27,000, intended to be completed largely in the first half of 2024. So we've been working with them. I think they reported at the last meeting, if you recall, Jackie Mitch was on the phone with us on Zoom, and she was reporting what was accomplished in Phase 1, everything from meeting with property owners to, and looking at what might be possible with Vanderwall, with the Weinbrenner building, and any number of things her report covered. And their report actually is in the packet tonight, the written report. But now we're at the point where we've had some really good things happen. Weinbrenner is going to be moving to the Mill Creek Business Park, to be starting construction within the next month and taking occupancy in about 14 months or so. So we're looking at possible redevelopment of that building. That was a big piece of the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan. The other big piece that we talk about a lot, or another big piece, I should say, is moving the police department out of downtown, including their presence in that old Baltus building where we store squad cars, getting out of there and freeing up that, particularly that corner of Chestnut and 2nd, to potentially have that building raised and be looking at other options for getting some better development there. Those kind of bookends, in a way, with Weinbrenner and the old Baltus building are a key part of renovating and implementing the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan. So they're excited. We're excited at staff level. Hopefully council is as well. We're looking at authorizing Phase 2. This would be a roughly 16-month process, estimated cost around $50,000. And staff is very supportive of this. We would recommend moving forward. We do not have the money budgeted. What we budgeted for 2024 was $27,000 for Phase 1 and nothing for Phase 2, not knowing if the council would want to do Phase 2. So right now we're in the process at staff level of putting the money in for the 2025 portion for that budget. But we need to finish out 2024, and that requires us to get some additional funds that were not budgeted. So our recommendation is that you give authorization to staff to move forward with Vanderwall, authorizing Phase 2, and to direct that a budget resolution be brought to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee for their meeting next Tuesday.
A motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Fire. Alderman Tompkins.
I'm very supportive of this. I would just ask if the staff finance could consider having this paid for out of the 205 fund for economic development.
Yeah, that's being discussed as we speak. Good point.
Any other discussion, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Mormon,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
No.
That motion passes. Item Q, discuss council options to fill vacant council seat in District 5 following resignation of Ed Wagner, presented by Jessica Schifferl, City Clerk.
Okay, good evening. In your packet this evening, you had a memo from me that outlined 4 options that you have for how you could go about filling the vacancy of Alderperson Wagner in District 5. Option number 1 would be for a council appointment. If you chose option number 1, you would give me the direction this evening to go ahead and publish all of the required notices that are legally required for that. That would be 2 consecutive weeks in the Marshfield News Herald, as well as on the city website for several weeks. We would open that up with a deadline of October 14th for anyone interested in filling that vacancy to submit their resume and their letter of interest. At that point, the potential candidates would be invited to the October 21st meeting. That is a Monday. We moved that meeting for the league conference. That is not a typo. And the second meeting on November 12th, where we would take action. You would select the new alderperson for District 5, and they would take the oath of office and resume that chair. Option number 2 is to leave that chair vacant for the entirety of this term, which is April of 2026. Option number 3, you could call for a special election. There are a few caveats with that. Yes, we have a November election coming up. We all know that. the ballots are out for that. You've missed all of the filing deadlines, so we cannot just add this to that current election. If you would like to add it to the election for the April of 2025, you would have that potential with having the spring primary and the spring election and just adding District 5 in with the even districts that are already up for election in the spring. However, you cannot call for that election tonight. The earliest you could call for that election would be November 18th, because by state statute, with the filing deadlines and all of the determinations that had to be set, November 18th is the soonest possible date you could call for that election. If you wanted to call for a special election all on its own and just have a special election, you'd have to plan for the primary and the election. If you called for that tonight, your election dates would be either November 26th or December 3rd, with the for the primary, with the elections being either December 24th or December 31st. I have a few issues with how that might play out. And beyond that, you would be responsible for the full cost of running both that special primary and the special election. We would have to pay the county portion for all of the programming, all of the ballots, all of this staff time for the county that they would normally supply for us, in addition to all the city costs. So we'd be looking at roughly $7,000 to $10,000, depending on a lot of different factors there. Option number 4, you do have sort of a hybrid option between options 1 and options 3. You could choose to fill the vacancy outlined in option number 1, where we would put out that memo and look for candidates. You would appoint that person November 12th, you would select that individual, and then you could choose at that point that you want to call for that as a special election at your November 26th meeting. That would mean that that candidate that is taking position on November 12th would be responsible for taking out filing papers December 1st to get on the April ballot, and they would fill out the 1-year term. They would then again take out papers December of 2025 to run again should they so choose. So those are the options. I'm happy to answer any questions for you. This is discretion of this body, so whatever action you would like to take this evening is up to you.
We have a motion on the table by Alderman Tompkins. And Alderman Tompkins, what is your motion?
My motion is that the council will appoint someone, and that would be option number 1.
Alderman Varsher is second. Is that your privy?
Yes.
Okay, we have a question from Alderman Stauber, then a question from Alderman Spiros. Alderman Stauber?
Two things. This has not happened before, so what has been the precedent set by the council, and what were the parameters that the council took into consideration regarding time remaining in office and that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's ever been a specific threshold. If it's more than a year, then we do this. If it's less than a year, we do that. They do take into account how long the person will serve after whatever decision is made. In other words, in this case, you might look and say, well, the person can't be chosen by a special election until April of 2025. Is 1 year a good time for the person to serve after that? I think in several cases that I've been here, they've done it by appointment, but there's nothing saying that it can't be done another way.
And then the other question is somewhat related, a little bit off topic, but for people that are interested, we talked at one point about having the onboarding document on the website. And I don't know how difficult that would be, but it sure would be helpful for anyone that's considering it, because I've already received calls and had a couple of conversations with people that have expressed interest, and I may give a biased answer, and it'd be good for them to just see the orientation binder and what they're getting into before they're actually step forward.
Alderman Spiros?
Thank you. I think option 1 also is the best option, and then followed by option number 4. 2, I don't think we can leave that position vacant that long. That would be absolutely ridiculous, and they would not, the people in that district wouldn't have fair representation. And 3 is expensive. So I wouldn't want to do that. I actually lean really heavily towards option number 1, getting it filled as quickly as possible, and then allowing that person to stay in that spot and learn the position and go from there.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I'm going to echo everyone's comments there. I think option number 1 is definitely the way to go. My question would be, since Ed has voluntarily resigned. Hence why we can't go with the other option, because I don't think Ed's going to donate $7,000 to $10,000 for that one. So my question would be, if we're going to move forward with option one, which I do think is the best, would it be inappropriate to have, I guess now former Councilmember Wagner's recommendation for candidates or review of those candidates? Just curious, since he represented that district, and the only thing I don't like about option one is that we're taking somebody and approving them as a body ourselves without really having much input from the district he'll be serving, or he or she will be serving. So my only thought would be, like, is it possible to pull in somebody like Ed from that district who would be able to kind of represent them in saying, these are the people that I think would best fit this role to support my district over the next, however long that term is. That'd be my only question or concern, is just because we are very much elected officials for the people. So I think it'd be wise to represent the people the best way possible.
Alderman Varsho?
I just want to respond to Mr. Werman's comments he just made there. Mr. Wagner can certainly have anybody fill out their letters and interest and resumes and send it in. And we can do it as well as councilmen. Anybody here can do it. Anybody listening or watching can do it. And I understand that he's been a councilman for a very long time, but his recommendations are just the same as everybody else sending in a letter or resume. We have to take a look at those one by one. So at this point right now, I think it's better for Mr. Wagner to take care of his health than to start worrying about who's going to succeed him in his seat for his district. Thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of number one. The only concern you had mentioned follow-up that they could be in the April election, but we could not call for that until November. Would that happen if we took number one? Because I kind of struggle with supporting us picking a candidate rather than allowing the constituents of that district to give them that opportunity in April. So I guess, how would that work with the option? Can it be brought up in November, or could you please explain a little bit?
You can certainly go with option number one tonight. And if after the resumes are submitted and you have 1 or 2 or 5 candidates, I think when Mr. Giles was appointed, we had 4 candidates for that seat. That was about 2 months ahead of schedule of where we are now. So that's why that one was not on the spring election as an option. In November, you could always reevaluate and say, we really want to get this out there. I would need to know right away and right after that November 18th deadline, so that we could hit the marks for notification so that somebody could file paperwork.
Okay. Could there possibly be a reminder for that date? So it could come up if we wanted to do that?
I'll find out if I can give you that reminder, or if you need to do that reminder yourself. There are some limits on what I'm allowed to remind you of. So.
Yep, that's why I asked. Thank you.
Alderman Fire?
This is not a new subject. It's been done in my 24 years. We've appointed the person to take over the job and let him go through until the regular election would come up 2 years from now. I think that this is nothing new. It's been done many times, and that anybody that we've ever appointed has never really been a bad appointment. If we can't do the job, then nobody else can. So I think that it's our job to replace who we want on the council. And I don't think we'll have a problem. We've never had a problem with any of our appointees. We've had a lot of problem when people got elected in a regular election process, but that's a whole different ballgame. Sometimes you don't get the attitude right when you elect them. So I think we should just elect somebody from the council should elect somebody and let them finish out Ed's term. Simple as that. So complicated.
Alderman Tompkins?
I agree. And also that is what we did with District 8, as there was a 1.5 years left and the council appointed, and Alderman Giles filled that spot and then did an election during the proper time. What I really don't want to see is people not wanting to step up, because if we say to them, hey, if you put your name forward and we appoint you, by the way, in a month, you're going to be going out and getting signatures, and then you're going to be running a campaign. And then, oh, by the way, next year, you're going to do it all over again. Who's going to want to sign up for that? So I think we should just do it the same way we did it with Alderman Giles, District 8 and 7, sorry, 7. And yeah, this is a position that doesn't pay a ton, so there's not people lining up at the door to do it. So I think we should not put barriers up to those people.
Any other comments, questions? I see Alderman Wormer, you took your hand down. You're all good? Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. When this first topic came up, I agreed with what Mr. O'Reilly was saying, where I didn't feel overly comfortable. But to Mr. Fryer's position, I think we don't have much of another option. Part of our job here is to be uncomfortable. And I think this is one of those positions where we're going to be uncomfortable selecting someone. And if we, I mean, like I said, I don't feel great about it, but I'm going to have to do it. And so I think that's the best and realistic option that we have is option 1.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman,
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros,
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item R, discuss possible ordinance prohibiting appointment of former employees of certain city departments from serving on related committees, boards, and commissions, presented by Russ Stauber, District 6 Alderman.
Thank you, Mayor. So when the idea was initially floated at our last council meeting, I think going into that meeting, the city attorney had an opinion that it was not detrimental to, or not breaking any laws, I guess. And I just wanted to make sure that the opinion stated by the city attorney hasn't changed since we first talked about it.
Cap, we can't hear you.
I'm assuming you can hear me now, right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that I understand your question. The concern being that whether somebody was employed by a department previously, creating a conflict of interest, is that the concern?
Well, I'll put it this way. So the proposal on the table is that former employee not be allowed to serve on a commission, whether it be university commission, plan commission, or utility commission. And I think you said that legally there's no concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's my opinion, that you could put that restriction in place if you chose to, and you can have your reasons to do that. But I also don't think that you're required to do that. There are conflicts of interest rules in place under our policy, and whether those are, whether a certain circumstance presents a violation of that policy has to be addressed at any point in time, whether somebody's taking that position or not. So you have those rules in place to protect against the kind of thing that would be a concern for a conflict of interest. Just assuming that because somebody has, this type of relationship, because they had been employed by a department or associated with a department at the time that they're appointed, that does not automatically mean that there's a conflict of interest in place. Each instant would have to be reviewed. Whether you put a requirement in place or not, that still would always stand. There would be an evaluation of whether or not there's a conflict of interest. Again, keeping in mind that the rules that we have in place, the policy that we have in place related to a conflict of interest are specifically addressing certain things, one of which having a personal interest and the other of which having a financial interest. And that's typically what's being addressed in that situation. I think some of the concern that's being raised or the issue of concern that's bringing this issue up at this time is sort of just, is there a philosophical difference in terms of how somebody might look at it? And that's going to be up to this body. So I think you can go either way with regard to this, as long as you are stating, your reasons for doing that.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Alderman Werman, did you have a question to that topic, or I guess, no?
Excuse me, I'll call on them.
All right, if he wants to, yeah, sorry. So the thought that came to mind and made me want to raise this issue was, not this council, but future councils and the potential for retribution by a former employee or cronyism of a former employee. And these are unlikely to happen, but there are no rules in place to guard against this. And in doing a little bit of research, conflict of interest, I did come across that. And I think from what I read, a conflict of interest might be more likely to occur if a member of a governing body were to leave that governing body and ask for some kind of favors, knowing what that person already knows. So that's really not a concern of mine, a conflict of interest. But I do appreciate the fact that someone who might have worked for a department, division, is going to come in with a lot of working knowledge. But I look at it more as that you're serving on a board of directors. And in my world, I just can't imagine that happening where a former employee would come and serve as a board of directors for that company or governing body. It just doesn't seem to make sense. In some communities and in some states, there are rules in place where it's not allowed that an employee work for or be appointed to a commission. And in some other areas, there were like cooling off periods. And again, worst case scenario, you've got someone who was terminated, and I think that might have happened decades ago here in Marshfield. Someone was, maybe the position was eliminated at a particular division, and they ended up back on the council, which I thought was kind of interesting. But so it was really just to avoid the potential for retribution or cronyism, and that's really the gist of it. It's not pointing at any one individual. It's just we've seen it on the Fire and Police Commission. Sometimes there are unions involved, and it just doesn't smell right to me when you've got a former employee that serves on the governing body or board of directors.
Alderman Werman?
Thank you. Yeah, and I raised my hand early because I wanted to get in on this topic right away. So I'm really torn on this because I completely understand Alderman Stauber's comments because I had the same thought. And I'm going to take everyone back here to when Chris Hansen got elected to the Fire and Police Commission. And I remember the comment came up of like, what do we do? Because Chris works for a company or owns a company. I forget how it exactly worked out, but I believe they do work for the police vehicles. And so there was extra comments about like, okay, well, does Chris just sit out of that? And I think part of what we need to understand is that when these people come through for any of this, no different than us, there is an expectation that you have to come in and be an adult and know what you're accepting under potential penalty. Like if this is a conflict of interest, you need to step out. We could say the same thing about a lot of us for any topic, really. Like it's at the beginning of the meeting, we say, are there any potential conflicts of interest? If I choose not to report one, that's kind of on me. So I think of it like that. The other thing I'm wondering is, can we take a different approach? Maybe we put them through extra training. Maybe we have them do ethics meeting or something of that sort, because I think that's what we did with Chris, because I can agree. And I was thinking about it in the sense of, we had a facial come through not long ago, who was a former council member, actually held my seat for a long time, and now is serving on another commission. And so, like, is that a conflict of interest? Because what if Nick has bad blood with that said commission from his time on council? Or, there's a lot that I think we're kind of opening up a can of worms. And I think, to my mind, immediately went to an additional training of like unconscious bias, because it's very easy to be biased unintentionally. I mean, we literally have to do it at my job. We have to take training for that, simply because you could be interviewing someone and find out they went to such and such school, and you're just like, oh, you're one of those people. Like it's something you unintentionally do. And I think that's a given when you come from places like that. Like, here's another example. Mike O'Reilly owns an electric company. Mike serves on the Utilities Commission. Like, it's not a negative, but anybody could argue like, oh, what if Mike's in on this? What if Mike knows this? But that's up to Mike to step back from that. The benefit that Mike brings is that he has a lot of electrical knowledge and a lot of knowledge into the industry and the background for stuff like that. And that's where I think we'd be losing if we don't allow people like that. So I would rather go an alternative route and maybe mandate some extra training or ethical meetings versus completely not allowing somebody to do it. But I like the train of thought that Alderman Stauber is going down, in the sense of we are potentially opening ourselves up to trouble there. And then, to that like boys club mentality of the old days of like, hey, everybody's kind of in together. They all know each other. These people work together and now they're helping each other out. So I do want to avoid stuff like that, because we're in a small town. Whether it's real or not, people are going to be saying stuff like that. So best to mitigate the risk. I'd rather go that route.
Alderman Fire?
When I first heard this, when Councilman Member Stauber mentioned this, I think there's something to look at. If you have an employee that's worked for us, say, 1 year, 10 years, 30 years, and you're saying to them, now you cannot get on a board or commission because you serve for the city loyally, now you've made them a second-class citizen. If they're elected, if they're a citizen of Marshfield, they should be allowed to apply for anything in the city. It shouldn't be because they work for that commission and they're only one vote. If you're electing that person or getting that person, it's only one vote. If you got 8 people on there, now there's 7 other people that can battle the problem that you're looking for. You never make a citizen a second-class citizen, because that's not correct, especially when they're a faithful employee. Now you're saying you were great. I'm glad you did a good job for 30 years. I'll give you a little plaque, but you can't serve again on the city because you work for that company. That is not correct. That's wrong. And I don't care how you cut it, it still makes you a second-class citizen. And nobody in Marshfield should be considered second-class.
Alderman Varsho?
And it's just, I see a lot of issues with this too because of the fact of where do you stop? So instead of an employee, what about an employee's spouse? Or an employee's children, or a relative. So the employee doesn't want to have retribution, but what about the family members? So now a family member is going to put in, and oh, they didn't work there, so let's put them in, and now they're going to have retribution as Mr. Stauber is trying to avoid. So, I mean, it goes to that point where now you have employees and relatives, and you're going there, well, what about a citizen? What about a citizen's not happy with Marshfield Utilities? And then all of a sudden it comes opening, they put a thing on, and it's just a regular citizen that never worked there. I think it's really restrictive right now. I don't think that it's something that we should go down that rabbit hole at this point. Thank you.
Alderman Stauber?
So it's not restrictive. You're suggesting we could make it more restrictive by including spouses and family members. I'm not suggesting that at all. So it's not very restrictive. It just identifies 3 commissions, that's it. And it would be a former employee of that department or division, Mike. It wouldn't be, they'd be cast to the street and couldn't serve in any other capacity within the city of Marshfield, because we've got a very qualified commissioner on the utility right now who's a former police officer, as you know. So it would just draw the lines a little bit and help us avoid those 2 possible scenarios.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you for clarifying that. Just to refresh my memory, are we talking about library, utilities, and fire and police? No, we are not.
Can I speak to that for a second? Yeah, I framed the wording that you see on the agenda, and that was not exactly what Councilmember Stauber had asked for. He was very specific. I just framed it that way in case the conversation was going to go beyond that to any of our other committees, boards, or commissions. But that's never been I don't believe it's been a suggestion to go in those directions.
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Giles, you make a motion, and what is your motion?
I would make a motion to actually consider voting on or establishing such an ordinance.
Second by Alderman Stauber, do you agree? Any other comments or questions? Alderman Tompkins and Alderman Spiros?
Okay, I'm just clarifying again. So when I asked for the 3, there was 4 in here. So are we really still talking about, in this memo, it says Fire and Police Commission, Marshfield Utility Commission, Plan Commission, and University Commission. Those are the 4 we're talking about? Is that correct? And then the motion is for an ordinance to be written and then for us to consider it? Is that what the motion is? Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, I was a little confused on the motion too. I didn't quite catch what Alderperson Giles said. So just for my sake, is he making a motion to draw up an ordinance with Russ's proposals of restricting people if they were a former member or worked for a company? I'm just confused because I couldn't understand what he said.
Yes, it would be a motion to draw up an ordinance and then in the future, once it was drawn up, to have us vote on that.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I don't know. It's never easy to make an amendment virtually, but I would recommend that we amend the proposal to actually be an ordinance on how to handle former employees as appointees for commissions and committees, rather than it be not allowing them to be a member of the commissions or committees.
And is there a second to that amendment? Alderman Raggles seconds that motion from Alderman Werman?
No, I was trying to hit amend to allow.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so no, I was not seconding that.
So you're not seconding Alderman Werman's amendment?
Correct, I am not.
Okay.
That was an accident.
Okay, thank you for trying to help. Seeing no second, we'll go back to the original motion, which was made by Alderman Stauber. And if you would please, one more time, just read that motion.
It would be a motion to have an ordinance drawn up to restrict former employees from serving on the aforementioned boards, and then to vote in the future on that ordinance.
And Alderman Stauber, you still second that motion the way that it is? Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
No.
Mrs. Spiros?
No.
That motion passes.
That motion
No, it
fails.
fails.
No, I'm sorry, that motion fails.
63.
I'm sorry. Item S, discuss possible creation of a direct charge for street lighting costs presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, going back a couple of years, we've been talking about this probably before a few of you were even on the council, but we did include in the past two budgets to create a direct charge for street lighting. The intention there is we have a budget of roughly $250,000 for the electricity and the repair and maintenance of our streetlights, the ones for which the city of Marshfield is responsible, as opposed to Marshfield Utilities. And the idea, which has been used in different cities across Wisconsin, is to directly charge the property owners for their portion of the street lighting costs. And there's different models in which you could do that. I think I included a couple in your packet. Typically, it comes down to something like creating a residential unit or something to differentiate residential and commercial customers in terms of how much people are going to pay. One of the misnomers people might have if you do create a street lighting direct charge is that, wait a minute, I don't have a street light in front of my house. I live on a cul-de-sac, and the nearest one is 500 feet down that way. It's not about the benefit you have at your specific property from a specific street light. It's about the fact that we all benefit from streetlights across the entire community as you drive down Central and as you drive down Veterans Parkway, you go to other neighborhoods, you go to commercial places. So we're all beneficiaries of street lighting to some degree. We have been working with our financial advisor from Ellers. He's done this in different communities, a couple of them down in southern and western Wisconsin. So he's walked them through that process. Prairie du Sac is one of them. I've got a copy of their ordinance in your packet and another one as well. So the details of this would still need to be worked out, but the premise is this. This would spread the cost of street lighting across all property owners. You notice I didn't say taxpayers. It's not just taxpayers. So we'd have kind of a dual system for doing this because with respect to tax-paying individuals and entities, it's something that we could then place a direct charge on their tax bill if in fact they fail to pay the annual cost of this their portion of this new program. If you're a nonprofit or somebody like that, we can't put it on your taxes. What we would do is a different kind of billing process and a different kind of collection process from that. But we would be looking to include all property owners because all property owners, broadly speaking, benefit from streetlights. We did talk with Marshfield Utilities, Nick and some staff there about trying to get the billing to occur through Marshfield Utilities, part of the electric and water bill, sort of a tack-on charge, if you will. There were some issues and concerns that made that very difficult, to say the least, because the billing that utilities does on their electric customers, for example, is a very different system than the type of flat fee that we'd be looking to try and implement based upon a category of user, residential versus commercial, and those types of things. So it really comes back to us, and that's why our suggestion is if we do it internally through billing, and then, like I said, with tax-paying entities, put it on the tax bill as a charge if they don't pay, and having to pursue it differently if in fact it's a non-tax-paying entity. So at this time, we're really looking to find out if you would seriously be interested in this. If you are, we'd like to pursue it. We're kind of poised to pursue it. We've gone through some of the legal questions and other things, and we feel that it's a good move for the city to look at doing that so that the cost of that program is, again, reimbursed directly from those people who benefit from streetlights. I would take any questions you have. Otherwise, I would look for some direction from the council on whether or not to actively pursue this program for our community.
First Alderman Stauber, then Alderman Warren, then Alderman Tompkins.
Thank you. Specific to collecting a flat fee, how do we currently collect for the hydrant fee?
That's done through Marshfield Utilities. That's the public fire protection, correct? Or am I thinking of the wrong fee?
And how is that any different?
As it relates to public fire protection, so there's a misconception when it comes to public fire protection because everyone associates it with firefighting and the trucks and such. But actually that charge is a fee that we place on our bills for upsizing our water mains, for the hydrants, the maintenance, and the water that's used for fighting the fires. So it's a special charge that's just for our infrastructure. It's just a different way of charging customers for that piece. Instead of socializing it through consumption, it's based on a different methodology.
So just to correct the administrator then, there's not a system constraint that would prevent you from collecting a flat fee for this if the council decides to pursue it?
Well, the challenge that Steve kind of alluded to is the fact that the utility, both electric and water, we bill based on a meter. And if you have a property, let's say I own a home, but I rent it out and I'm the property owner, we're billing the renter every month, not the property owner. Then you also have properties that don't have any meters. I'm assuming you would charge them a flat fee as well. And those we don't have any billing information on at this time.
I'm still not tracking. So if I'm a landlord and have multiple properties, I'm going to receive bills, those fire protection fees for all of my properties, or it goes to the tenant?
The tenant.
And how is it any different than with lighting?
Lighting, I believe the way the methodology has been explained to me is it's based on the property owner. Property owner will receive all the bills for all the street lighting charges, not the tenant.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize for not being more clear about the issue. And one of the issues, as Nick started out with immediately, was that we're talking about different people being treated differently based upon their status. Again, landlord, tenant, whether or not the metering, everything, truthfully.
Alderman Warren.
All right, I'm just going to be frank. I hate this. As a taxpayer, as a property owner, as a council member representing people that own property and pay taxes, I don't like this at all. I guess I just have a lot of questions. Number one, when we're talking about the state of Wisconsin and various areas, cities doing this around, are we talking about city-owned utilities or are we talking about private utilities? Because, Marshfield Utilities is city-owned, right? So then I think about, how many other locations are city-owned? Are we comparing ourselves to them? Are we comparing ourselves to a mixture? So I think those are big things. Number two, I think the utilities, what we've established over the last year and 6 months or so that I've been on the council is it's one of the more profitable, entities, I guess, within the city right now. And we just went through, leaps and bounds going through all the numbers over that since I've joined the council to kind of review, where that money's tied up and what we're investing. I mean, not saying that $250,000 is, not a lot of money, but I'm like, I think there's more than enough there that I don't understand why we wouldn't roll this in to utilities fees and charges instead of, charging taxpayers and property owners, et cetera, for this. And then my other question would be, if we've been exploring this, we just went through a whole review of the utility funding and took, they're now giving us a larger chunk of that. And I believe that one of the agreements we had was that it had to go towards certain fees and costs. Did we not plan for that? I mean, could we not have said, hey, we know we're getting this much from the utilities, now we're going to put that towards this? This is one of those ones where I'm really torn. Like, I know we're trying to do well financially and do better by ourselves because we've been in debt and struggling to budget and things like that. But I'm also looking at it like, how are we looking out for the residents of the city when we're doing stuff like this? Like, it's just another fee to me, and I don't like that at all. I feel like it feels like pandering, right? Like, we're just like, hey, can you give me some more money? Why not? This is what it's for. It's like, now I'm paying for streetlights? Like, we're talking about wheel taxes and all sorts of stuff. I got to be honest, I just don't like this at all. It feels slimy to me. That's the only word I could think of to describe it. And so I'm sure that we could find a way to justify it. It could be a necessity, but it's not something that I feel like I'm ever really going to be happy with, knowing some of the things I know now from being on the council the last year and a half. I feel like we have better solutions than this.
Did you want to say something, Nick?
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I could address a few of those comments. In the names of the cities that I've seen that have implemented this, some of them are municipal utilities like Marshfield, others are investor-owned utilities or cooperatives, so there's a varying degree. The rates that the utility charge are authorized through the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. And ultimately, we're providing a street lighting service, and the end customer is the city, not the individual customers that we have that have electric bills or water bills. And it's a regulated process, so it's not something we can just invoke at the utility without this going through a city process. We would have to have PSC approval, and there isn't any of that on the books currently. And I don't think they would, because it's tough to, you're trying to split a cost amongst customers, and it would be hard to figure out a methodology that the state would buy into and take on and approve, likely.
Yeah, and just so you know, Nick, this is not an attack on you at all when I say that. I mean, I'm just echoing frustrations as I think anybody as a taxpayer, property owner would, but also like, I just feel like there's alternative solutions and we should be exploring those. And again, not a reflection on you at all. I know you have a job to do, and I think the utilities have been a great partner with the city. I just feel like we got to have some alternate solutions we can look at. I hate the idea that we're trying to just, and again, it's not a money grab, but I hate the idea that that's what it feels like. Like, especially for people that are uneducated about this, they're going to get something in the mail and be like, what the hell is this? Like, why am I paying more now? And it gets frustrating. And I just feel like we got to find better ways to do some of this stuff. And like I said, not a reflection on you. I apologize if it came off at all that way. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate you walking me through that thought process a little bit more. Hopefully we can find a way to partner on this going forward and maybe find a better solution for everyone. Thank you for the additional comments.
And Nick shook his head, no, he does not think that you were attacking him. And I'm watching him right over there. Next up, Alderman Tompkins. Next up, listen to me.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so this, just a little history, goes back to the budget cycle of 2022 when we had an $800,000 deficit. And so as a city, we were scrambling, trying to figure out how are we going to deal with this. And so this was one of sort of the ideas that had been brought forth of, is this an extra way that we could get revenue? Basically, is this an extra tax that we could put on because we couldn't raise taxes that year? I think we raised them by I can't even remember, but we had this huge deficit. So that's where this all started. Taxpayers already pay for this, but it comes through our tax levy and it's in our budget. So basically, this is sort of a legal way that we can get more revenue. So that's just, whether opinions about that or not, that's just what it is just trying to get more revenue. The benefit of this is that we are asking nonprofits in town to chip in. Because at the moment, they are not paying for the streetlights like the citizens and business owners. They're not paying for the streets. They're not paying for the parks. They're not paying for fire and police. So it's one legal way that we could ask them to contribute towards running the city. So there's a great benefit to that. My question is, because I hear, like people don't want an extra tax, and basically, if you really look at it, it's an extra fee. Is there a way to do it so that we do capture that nonprofit revenue, but then somehow shift so that the people who are paying the tax levy have a decrease? Does anyone understand what I'm saying? So is there a way to do that so that the citizens don't feel it, but we are getting contributions from nonprofits? I don't know, but that's just an idea.
Alderman Fire?
I think there's another way to look at it. I don't think that the average taxpayer is going to complain about $2.25 a month. What you're going to hear is what they're getting for their $2.25. We say we're a safe community. I challenge you to walk from one light to the other light in a block, and you tell me that you're safe. For my neighborhood, I have a light in the middle of the block, so my block's got some light. Because you go from one, first off, it's the color of the light. The light are gold, they're not white. They should be white like this. All these lights should be bright. If you put one on this corner and one on the opposite corner, I defy you to walk in any block and find that you're actually safe. Just because of the street light. The street light does not make you safe. And it may not, but at least should give you a chance to see figure of somebody behind you. But with these lights we got now, you don't see anything. It's just there. It lights the corner. So I think the biggest faux you're going to get is not the cost for what they have to pay, is what they get for their $2.20. It's not a safe light. It's just not. I don't know where it came from, but when I go down Central Avenue, they're in the middle of the block, so you get a lot of light on Central Avenue. Safest place to walk in this town is up and down Central Avenue. Back and forth, and you'll be in good shape. And maybe go through the park. Other than that, you're not safe walking with the light we've got.
Alderman Werman, then Alderman Riley, then Alderman Spiros.
Thanks. Sorry to jump back in, but yeah, just to Mike's point. So I don't think necessarily citizens would complain about the cost. It's more that we constantly come back to them. It's semi-related. I was going to bring it up later as part of a budget discussion, but I was recently talking to another elected official from a different town, and I had said, hey, what do you guys do for revenue? Because we're struggling, and Councilmember Rigel on our team had proposed, we need to work on our revenue. Like, we need more streams of revenue coming in. That's how we're going to fix ourselves. And he said, taxes. And I was like, well, we do that. We actually we do tax quite a bit, I think, where we live. And he said, then you don't have a revenue issue, you have a budget issue. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind here. We can keep adding fees and taking more and more. The problem is, at the end of the day, we're never going to make anything if we don't fix our budgeting issue. And so that's my concern with coming back with an additional fee. It's like, it's not the $2 and some odd cents. It's the fact that we keep coming back to our people saying, please give me more. So that was just for clarity, because Mike brought it up, and I think it was a good point. It's not the amount for me. And you should know that just simply from me voting for the police building. Like, it's not the amount, it's the fact that we keep coming back for additional things. And I think that's starting to weigh on people as we move further along. So that's kind of where my thought process is.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mayor. Contrary to what Alderman Fire said, I have had so many people reach out to me about this time. When this came through last time, I didn't hear a whole lot about it. I have received numerous calls and ran into numerous people that are just fit to be tied over this. And I don't know if it's just they didn't hear about it the first time and it made its way through and now it's happening, but in order to represent them, I will be voting no on it. But I would also like to add that I find it very interesting that we're looking at creating fees for nonprofits. Tonight, we just had a nonprofit move through without anybody increasing any fees on them. that's coming directly out of our budget. So I don't know what else to say other than I would agree 100% with Alderman Werman's comments on this. And I think Marshfield has got a spending problem and not an income problem. And that's where I will stand on it.
Alderman Spiros?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo a couple of things and not belabor this a lot, but I do want to say that I have also heard from upwards of at least 10 people over the last week and a half about this lighting fee. And they're irritated and they're angry. And, you know, I went through the explanation, you know, this is like you're talking like $30 a year or whatever. And that did not seem to matter. What seemed to matter is the fact that they felt like we're just constantly zapping them for one more thing, and we're not cutting our budget at all. We're not watching our spending at all. That's kind of the thing that I heard over and over and over, along with the idea that if they have to pay the fee, they just want their particular light on their corner shut off. So they would rather have the light shut off than to pay for the fee. So while I understand that this would help a little bit with our budget, I was elected to vote in representation of the people who elected me. So I will be voting no, because that is what I have overwhelmingly heard from the people who elected me.
Alderman Fire?
I think maybe we don't miss it, but you know, we create a service where our taxes is a service to the community of Marshfield. And the problem we have here is they don't want an increase and they don't want us to find a way to do this, but you say you want to cut the budget. Well, right now, we're so far behind on road maintenance that you're never going to cut the budget as long as I live. Because just to get ahead of this thing, you're going to have to raise something. And I don't know where you're going to cut your money, because right now, there's a lot of roads that need fixing. They're not going to get fixed until we find a way to do it. And we are a service. We're not a business that take money, put it in the bank, and make interest on it, because we haven't got anything left at the end of the year. Just remember, it's a service, not just a company running the big.
Alderman Stauber?
So just a few thoughts. To Alderman Werman's comments about the services that we choose to deliver and those that we don't. I don't know what the ratio is, Mr. Turchi, but it always struck me as interesting that when we have a street project, we will split that cost three ways. Residents on the north side of the street pay a portion, residents on the south side of the street pay a portion, and the city pays a portion. And these are potentially, I think they're like over $1,000. I haven't been involved in one yet, but I think I'll see one next year. So that's kind of odd that we'll expect citizens to participate in street replacement costs. And it's always struck me as odd, but that's just the way we've done it, and we get away with it. Other communities will have leaf vacuums go through this city, and you know, you can blow your leaves onto the street and they'll come through with their vacuum and suck them up. We don't have that. So that's just, you know, again, it's a service that we chose not to offer. But the way I look at this is that the cost to deliver the services that we provide is increasing. And we can address that one of two ways. We can be creative and come up with fees such as this, which would be, I guess, on the surface, an offsetting fee. It's not going to, at the end of the day, the resident is not going to see a reduction in their taxes, most likely, but it'll help us address the increasing costs to deliver the existing services without cutting those services. And the other question I would ask, you know, when we have these conversations with residents, it's easy to say, cut your budget. And I've been down that road many times over the years, and I've been told that we're paying the price for that. Don't raise taxes. But if you were to ask a resident on the street, would you rather have a tax increase that maybe nets out an equivalent of this light fee, or would you rather have a light fee? I think that most people are probably going to say, increase my taxes slightly to cover the cost. I don't know, but that's what I would expect people to say. You know, because a fee, it doesn't sit well with people. You know, the wheel tax is a fee, and and late fee is, it just doesn't come across very well. But if the services that we choose to continue to deliver have increasing costs and we're looking for money, fee is one option, raising taxes is another, unless we want to give some guidance to staff to start to eliminate some of the services that we currently provide.
Alderman Spiros?
Call the question.
Calling the question. Who would like to, with discretion of the council? We need a motion to call the question.
That's what Rebecca just made, wasn't it? Oh, there's nothing on the, oh, I'm sorry. There's no motion on the table, so what are we calling the question on? I'm sorry.
Okay, so Rebecca, did you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we table this indefinitely.
Second by Alderman O'Reilly. Alderman Tompkins?
Well, my question was before the motion, but it still is applicable. Could we at some point during this season have Jennifer Selensky sort of give us, hey, this is where we are if we do this lighting fee, and this is where we're not going to be? Like, I think we need to know how important it is for our budget, whether we have it or not, because I think that's going to help us make a decision. So if that's possible, I don't know if that's going to happen during our budget season, but just to sort of have an option or to see the numbers and say, this is where we're going to show up. Thank you.
Alderman Stauber?
And along those lines, I would like to know what not-for-profits, the churches, whatever, what is the expected gain by including them? And if it's in here, I missed it. So.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. Just responding to a few comments real quickly if I can. It's kind of two-phased, the reason for doing this. Number one is we do involve all the property owners, and not all the property owners pay for the services they get. You're seeing this with stormwater utilities, have for many years. The city has fought off this idea, but many communities say, look, if you put a parking lot up and it's massive and you're a church or you're whoever you are and you're putting water into the street, it's reasonable to expect you to pay toward that because we have to collect it and treat it. And this is kind of a little bit different version of this. But the other part simply is, and there's no way to hide it, is revenue, is a need for revenue. And, when I go to conferences and seminars and talk to my peers in different communities, they're all dealing with it. We have levy limits that restrict greatly how much we can even tax our own citizens, even if we want to. So in the days gone by, people used to say, well, if we raise our taxes by 2% or 4% or 6%, those aren't alternatives anymore. When you look at the state, it gives you that little minor increase for, net new construction. You may be looking at the most you could possibly do is 0.8% or 1.1%. Taxes is not really part of the equation. Your hands are literally tied. So cities and villages are looking for ways in which they continue to provide the services that people want and expect. It really does become ultimately a service level question. We've talked about this at staff level with finance staff and others. What services could we possibly someday do without? And that's really where we need to end up in the next couple of years. Because truthfully, I've been city administrator for 13 years, and as time has gone on, and thinking about the budgets that Councilmember Stauber is mentioning, where we held the tax rate increase to 0.5% or something, we've been building this for a while, but there's really not a whole lot of fluff, fat, whatever you want to talk about in the budget. I've spent the last, 3 weeks plus with Jennifer and others, leaders in our city staff, trying to find ways to make this work. You find a couple thousand here, you find a couple thousand there. It's difficult sledding. So we would be remiss, and how you react is fine. You need to make the decision. I won't hide it. You can call it a fee, you can call it a tax, whatever. But we are, like many communities, looking for ways to continue to fund the services we have. We'd be remiss in not bringing this to you for discussion and consideration, whatever your decision ultimately is.
Alderman Weigel?
I think I'll keep this brief. I'm torn on this too. I can see both sides. Now, I just want to point out one thing. As Mr. Barr just pointed out, we're talking about fractions of 1%. Traditionally, the Fed has been okay with a 2 to 3% inflation rate. which means to us, we need to either decrease the services by 2 to 3%, increase revenue by 2 to 3%, or some mix in between. We're not in that position. And Mr. Warman's acquaintance, that just simply boils it down to you have a spending problem. I'm going to gather that he's probably not from Wisconsin, because when I tell people that, you know, in Wisconsin, we can't increase taxes at will, they're shocked. But once again, just to shut up here and move on, we can't stay at status quo without either reducing services or increasing fees, or excuse me, increasing revenues. Apologize. Thank you.
Alderman Stover?
Just a concern with the word indefinitely. It just strikes me that we would be out-tying councils from, 10 years from now. So tabling is one thing, but tabling indefinitely strikes me as that this topic will never, ever be discussed again in the city of Marshfield. So I would make a friendly amendment that would remove the word from the motion indefinitely.
We have a second by Alderman Tompkins. Any other discussion? Yeah, Mr. Merman also seconded. We have 2 seconds. That's great. Alderman Weigel?
Right, just to respond to Mr. Stauber's concern there, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that by putting the word indefinitely on there, we're not selecting a date at which to bring this topic back up. We can still bring it back up in the future, just not at a specific date. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend to take out the word indefinite. So we are voting on that first. Okay. So please vote on the amendment to the original motion.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes. Now we go back to the original motion, which was made by, oh
Hang on
boy.
1 second. Me.
Yep, that's great. Motion made by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman O'Reilly. So now how do we do this if we took out the
Just be
amendment?
tabled.
Just to table, okay.
Table.
Any other discussion on the original motion? Alderman O'Reilly?
Being that we just voted to approve an amendment, wouldn't this be the amended motion?
No, oh, yeah.
And we don't have to vote on anything else. Yes, we do still have
Right,
to
still
vote.
have to vote
Yes,
on it.
that's what I thought. Yeah, I'm
On the
trying to-
original or
On
on
the-
the amendment?
Well, as amended.
As
Okay,
amended.
with the word,
Yes.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
making
good
sure.
point.
Yes, I'm
Good
sorry, I
point.
just said the wrong.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
didn't put that extra word in there. Now we have that as a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item T, discuss scope of what constitutes economic development, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we've had a lot of conversations in recent months and even beyond that about furthering economic development in this community. And it comes up from time to time that there's not always agreement on what economic development means. And Councilmember O'Reilly had requested that we have a discussion on this to try and get ourselves into some general consensus. And it's funny, if you looked at my memo in the agenda packet, I took a look at the source of all information, right? The internet. Great place to start. We're trying to find out what different communities and different entities considered to be economic development. And it's kind of broad-based. And I'm going to look at my own memo for a minute just to kind of read this out loud. This one piece I thought was kind of interesting. But it can be anything from, I found one policy for one community that says specifically, it must involve programs, projects, or activities that produce measurable outcomes, such as higher tax base, increased employment, et cetera. So very tightly framed. I found other sites, other communities that were much broader in scope and talked about things like quality of life and, public facilities being quality and recreational amenities, community events and activities being promoted. So it appears that economic development is really in the eye of the beholder as to how far you want it to go. It is very true. I think we'd all admit that the recreational amenities and quality of life and all those things do play into having companies want to come here, bring their employees here and set roots up in Marshfield. Whether you want to consider that economic development defined in terms of how we look at giving tax increment assistance or grants and loans or other types of public benefit is up to you. So what I would look for in this conversation is just a frank discussion about where you want that line to be. We probably will not decide it this evening, but in terms of what we bring forward, what we're all going to call economic development and what kind of measurables, if any, you want to see tied to that if we're advocating for city funding or assistance to be provided.
Alderman O'Reilly, oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Norman had his hand up first.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm asking as a general note, not, hopefully it doesn't come off in an insulting way, but like, what is the purpose? What's the point of doing this? And I'm asking mainly from like a legal perspective, like, do we have to chime in? Like, are we pigeonholing ourselves too much if we put a definition on what we consider economic development that we, are we putting this in documents, or is it just kind of to have our own general thoughts? Like, is this more of like a working session where we're just kind of kicking around different ideas? So I just kind of wanted to clarify like what our end game is from this action item.
I'll defer to Councilmember O'Reilly as to what he's hoping for will come out of this process, but my intent would be that there just be some consensus. I'm not looking for a policy that we, hey, so-and-so's looking for help, and they want us to provide them with some assistance funding or running utilities across the street to their property, but by gosh, it doesn't meet criteria A, D, and F. I don't want to tie our hands like that. I just want to see us have an understanding about what we're going to consider to be really economic development for purposes of bringing forward projects and discussing them. But I'll defer to you, Mike, as to whether you're looking for more of a policy.
No, I'm not necessarily looking for a policy, and I'll give a little history on this. Where this started for me was actually back when we were talking about workforce housing, entry-level housing. And I asked at multiple meetings, what is it? Because we never seem to have a focus. Everything seems subjective. And through that process, it got extremely frustrating for me. I mean, especially when you're dealing with housing, we know what a median income is. We can talk to the lenders. We can see where that is. And if we're looking for something specific like that, we should have a definition that we're going after. I often find that if we can't get what we think is affordable housing, we go with something else. And so that kind of frustrated me through that process. And as I've watched the economic development product here happen, it's the same thing. It's very subjective. I think going back to previous agenda item, economic development in my vision is something that is documentable in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean we have to say we are going to raise $10,000 in the following year. It doesn't have to be in dollar form or anything. But if we're going to call it economic development, where is that? We have a tendency to, well, we've had discussions about this on council. We can call almost anything economic development. That is not a good place to be, in my opinion, because filling holes in a budget with using money that's supposed to be for economic development when we are in the situation we are, in my opinion, needs to be focused on issues that are going to bring more money into the area and increase our economic status. So more or less what I wanted to see was some form of discussion on this so that we could try to at least develop a consensus. So it's not a grab bag for us to use anytime that we run into, well, this is a problem. Can we call it economic development? That is not a good way to lead. So that was the whole purpose behind it, and hoping to entertain some ideas, and maybe we can get a solid focus on what our goals are.
Alderman Stauber?
So I think we have two issues. One is availability of funds and what those funds can be used for. And I think that's what you're touching on, Mike, is can we look at the 205 fund and how can we utilize that? I'm looking at it a little bit differently, and I think economic development is maybe a need of a community. And at this point, I know back in 99, 2000, when I got on the council, we made a decision that we were going to create parks, business park, office park, industrial park. Because we saw a need in the city of Marshfield to increase economic development. And for me, the definition at that time was new jobs, well-paying jobs. That to me was traditional hardcore economic development, and give a little bit of a ripple effect when you increase the employment, taxes, et cetera, all kind of come along with that. And then I've kind of had to rethink that traditional thought in that housing. Now housing is it economic development or isn't it, or is it a function of economic development? In other words, if you think that economic development means creating more jobs, but you don't have housing for the employees, then it becomes a requirement of economic development in that form and fashion, if you will. So I guess I'm not too hung up on the phrase, and I'm glad Steve said it is what you want it to be. It's beauty in the eye, or it's in the eyes of the beholder. Mm-hmm. It can take many different forms. What I would like to do is just, make sure we've got a strategic plan in place. When opportunities arise, we hold them against our strategic plan and say, does this fit the city of Marshfield? Do we need this at this time? Yes or no? And it's not necessarily a definition or a case of what may or may not fit economic development. It's what is our mission as a community or the city, and what do we need to fulfill that mission? Economic development may be the answer to the question. It could be housing. It could be some other thing that we need to do as a community specific to Marshfield. So again, it's just kind of bigger picture, strategic plan based on a SWOT analysis, where are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and what's your mission and what's your strategy. And then again, you've got that strategy to refer to. It shouldn't be a book on the shelf that you look at every couple of years. It should be something that we work from. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Alderman Werman?
Thank you. Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know Mr. Sauer and I have thrown this out a few times. I actually have it again as a future agenda item that we need to establish our priority list and strategic plan as a council for the city going into this budget season. I think the next meeting we have here, October 8th, I know we're having our first budget meeting at 5 and then the council meeting at 7, but I do think that needs to be a topic of discussion so we can budget appropriately. And I think to Mike's point, an agenda item here, I think that we need to consider two things, that there's probably like a direct and indirect economic development, right? Like there's direct in that we reap the benefits of certain businesses coming in here and, paying certain fees or et cetera, but I think there's also indirect economic development just from the fact that there's businesses that will come into town and we will draw more people into town as a result. And I know this was a big topic when we went through the Columbus donation, and we talked about this a lot because it is something that could be economic development. I think there were other issues around it, which is why we ended up voting no as a council, but there was that economic development piece to it. And it would have been indirect, right? It would have been people coming into town for sports events and things like that and spending money at businesses around town that are already here. So I think there's a lot of that to consider, and that we should probably break it into those two pillars when we're really considering whether or not something is good for economic development here, and that's whether it's going to be directly or indirectly. And those should be probably weighted a little bit in terms of how we make our decisions, because indirectly isn't going to have as big of a payoff as we could probably guess. So I think that's one thing too, is we need to categorize that in addition to coming up with a strategic plan that we stick to.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All right, I'm going to go back to the utilities definition. This is because I'm going to be using this paradigm until someone gives me another one. So if we get a better one, that's awesome. But so this part isn't the utilities, but to me, economic development is we increase our tax base by supporting people and business. So then the question is how? How do we support people and business? How do we have people move in? And that's where the utilities thing of a stool with 3 legs. So we support people, we support them being educated, we support them coming in, we support them being able to work, all of those things we need so that we have workers. We support businesses, we support them by whatever ways that they need support so that they can actually operate here. And then we support place so that people actually want to live here. because you can have great businesses and it can be a terrible place to live and no one's going to move in. So 3 legs of the stool, but the whole goal of that stool is to increase our tax base. And so, you know, to what I'm hearing of our strategic plan and things like that, like every year, I think we need to look and say, where are we out of kilter? Where is the stool out of kilter? Where are our needs? Where are our priorities for this year? Maybe in the next 5 years, we don't have enough housing. Maybe in 10 years, our parks aren't great and people don't want to live here. Like, we just have to reevaluate every year. But the goal is still, we need to increase our tax base, or we need to maintain it. Maintain's the first. So all of that. And then after we sort of know where we are and what our priorities are, that's when I think we start looking at our outside partners. So we say, hey, part of our place is downtown Marshfield's helping us with place because they're helping us downtown. Visit Marshfield can help us with place because they can invest in some of these, you know, pickleball and Columbus and all of these other things. So that's when, you know, further down from this stool, we say, who can help us do this? And I think we have to kind of move that way, because then when we have people come in, we can say, oh, your project, your daycare project is helping with people because it's helping us have workers who can actually work. So who's helping us with that? And are you a partner? So, I mean, I think we kind of have to have some kind of paradigm from which we work off of.
Hey, thanks. All good comments all around. I appreciate all the feedback, and I want to kind of piggyback on a couple of comments I think made by council members Stauber and Werman, and I think actually Tompkins as well, about the need to have a strategic plan to be working from. And I've been working with the department heads in the last few weeks to gather information about what we've accomplished from the current one we're in. Some of you might not even know much about it because we don't talk about it a lot, but we've done 2 3-year strategic plans, one from 19 through 21, and one from 22 through 24. So we're wrapping up year 3 of the second one. They've been largely staff-driven. They've been more like a list of goals rather than a strategic plan. About 20 or 21 goals spread over like 7 or 8 functions. And we go back from time to time, okay, how are we doing on the HR goals? How are we doing on the finance goals? Oh, great, we've got our bond rating got bumped up. There's one of the goals. But it really is not a full-blown strategic plan process at all. And it's not the kind of guidebook I think that some of you might be thinking that will really help us to make decisions on Tuesday nights. So maybe not, you know, we can talk about it at the next meeting or something, but I don't think during the budget process you're going to want to go real deep into strategic planning. You might want to talk about priorities to get through this budget process, as we have some tough decisions yet to make. But maybe when the budget process ends, we get into mid to late November, kind of winding down, I can get some feedback from you as to what type of strategic planning process you want. Do you want somebody from outside to be leading it? Do you want, you know, what do you want it to look and feel like? We had Councilmember Stauber talk about SWOT analysis. Some people react positively to that. Some people have other ideas on what strategic planning might look like. But I really think that I agree with those comments about having a plan that we can use on a weekly basis to make decisions. And the one we've been operating with in recent years has been more goal-based. Check the list. You know, as I'm talking to the department heads, I found out we've done quite a few of those items, but it's not a strategic plan per se. So those would be my comments. One last comment, and that is about the amenities and some of that kind of stuff. Because I agree with the idea of 2 different frameworks for economic development. I think that was being said by maybe Councilmember Werman. You have the part that is TIF districts, building in the industrial park, building in the business park, getting them all to be beefed up and have more commerce. Then there's the other one, which is really kind of building the framework or laying down the framework, the environment for economic development per se to occur. Putting in Vandahay Waters as an example. I mean, I consider Vandahay Waters to be an economic development tool, and yet people, communities don't build aquatic centers to make money. You know why? Because they don't. You do them because people who come here who want to maybe look at where to live, they want to look at where their employees might want to live. They expect good libraries. They expect good pools. By themselves, they are not pathways to financial success. So there's that part of economic development as well. But I look forward to this conversation. I think it's a good one. I think at least getting in some general consensus from it would be a benefit. And I think as we go deeper into the fall, that's a good project.
Alderman Stauber?
I would strongly support a working session for the council, maybe the executive team. And I'm pretty confident that in 6 hours, we could probably do a really good job at coming up with a strategic plan. If you've got the right facilitator, he'll get it out of us, or he or she'll get it out of us, and we'll walk out of there pretty convinced on what our direction's gonna be. Be money well spent, in my opinion.
Okay, moving on to item U, discuss date time for joint meeting with CDA to discuss request for qualifications process for future redevelopment of the existing Weinbrenner Shoe Company building.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, again, I mentioned earlier when talking about the Vanderwall contract and the West Second Street redevelopment plan, that there's a buzz, there's an excitement about the fact that Weinbrenner is moving to the business park. We're all looking forward to that. As a result, we've got a property that can be redeveloped. And there are going to be companies, we believe, that are interested in doing that, who have a vision for perhaps multifamily housing or a mixed use of some type. We've already heard from one of them that we're kind of talking to, just kind of on the side from the Milwaukee area, who's very interested in a possible project there, and we believe that there'll be 2 or 3 others. So what our consultant, Jackie from Vanderwall, is suggesting is that we have a joint meeting of the CDA and the council. Remember, CDA is going to be involved in the West Second Street project overall, and get these 2 bodies together to talk about the prospects and to talk about an RFQ process. How are we going to frame this to try and get some companies interested in making proposals to the city, working with the city, and trying to get perhaps a good developer to look at a project that we can all be proud of on the west end of Second Street out there. I put some dates in the council packet when I saw opportunities for us being free, avoiding other meeting nights, avoiding the league conference in that 4th week of October. And I got a call from Carol Kerper over at CDA. They met yesterday, and they're favorable to Tuesday, October 29th. It's the 5th Tuesday, which means no city meetings, no council, no finance, budget, and personnel, or anything like that. So my recommendation would be that we look at having a joint meeting with the CDA at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, October 29th, to discuss an RFQ process to look at a developer for the Weinbrenner redevelopment project.
Alderman Stover makes a motion.
If you need a motion to support it, yeah, thank you.
The second, Alderman Fire, you agree? Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
No.
That motion passes. So Thursday, October 29th at 5:30.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Item V, request to select common council member to replace Ed Wagner on collective bargaining team for negotiations with fire and police unions, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. These next 2 items tie back to Councilmember Wagner, and I agree with what the mayor said earlier about him being thankful for all the tireless work that he put into his service on council and committees over the many years he's been with the city of Marshfield. Thanks, Ed. Your work will not be forgotten. But we are looking to replace him on the city's collective bargaining team. That's our negotiating with the fire and police unions for agreements. We are still, or I should say almost back in the discussion with fire union. We haven't resolved that contract yet, and police will be coming around the corner in a year or 2 for discussion. So we do need 2 council members on that team. Just a reminder that the council members serve with the finance director, the HR director, the police or fire chief, depending upon what union we're talking about, me, and then also a representative from the Fire and Police Commission. That's our 7-member team. And again, as I said, Rebecca and Ed have served faithfully for a long time. I'll be looking for a replacement for Ed Wagner on the collective bargaining team for management. And look for selection, whether it's tonight or very soon, so we can get that process move forward as we continue talking with the fire union.
Alderman Spiros?
Can I make a suggestion that we float this out like via email to see who's interested, and then maybe do a vote the next meeting once you see who's even interested in it? Oh, and I would suggest that was the next item too.
Is that agreeable with everybody on the council? Yes? Just shake your heads, that'd be great. Okay, so that's what we will do. And can we just tie the next one right into that?
Yeah, that's fine. I would have just been looking for consensus on that as well.
Okay.
And I think finding out who's interested and then voting in 2 weeks would be just fine.
Alderman Tompkins and Alderman Werman?
Thank you. In that email, could you also maybe talk about the time commitment. I think the collective bargaining one might take all day. I'm not quite sure, but it might be helpful for people to know what, for the housing, it's like twice a month, a meeting, just so people know what the time commitment is.
Yeah, just real briefly, and I can do that. Real briefly, the fire and police union negotiations is really hit and miss. We go through long periods of time when we aren't even talking with them because there's no pending contracts. The housing committee has been looking at trying to meet every other week initially if they can, but I'll make that clear in the email.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one other thing, and that is that we just discussed how to fill the seat for Ed. So would the expectation for this be that the council members that step in are going to stay on these boards, committees, commissions, et cetera, until we come to the next re-election and go through everything like this past one? Or would it be that that would be until the new person would step in and get ramped up? Or I just kind of want to make that clear too. Like, is this a permanent reallocation until the next go around of assignments?
That's not my understanding. I mean, certainly that person is interested. They could be considered. If we think about this in the broader sense right now, the union negotiations one is particularly important right now because Rebecca does a great job on that body, but it'd be nice to have a second person as we try to get that one maybe to a point where we can bring it back to the council in the coming weeks for hopefully resolution of that contract with the fire union. The housing committee, I first proposed that as 5 people. And it became 6 when a council member threw his name in the hat at the end, and that was great. We have one more person that is wired. If we go with 5 for a while, that's okay. So truthfully, we could wait and see who is chosen in this process that we talked about tonight for picking an appointee for District 5 and then go from there. It's not quite that pressing. So going back to your question, I don't think it's incumbent that you come on board as a new council member and you're told, hey, by the way, you're on the union negotiations committee and you're on the housing committee. Have a nice day. Right, I don't think that would happen.
Right, because these actually were volunteers. Rebecca and Ed both volunteered.
Correct.
We did not vote them on. They just volunteered because this is not one of the stable
standing committees.
Yep, right. Yeah. Correct, Rebecca? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say, these aren't regular committees that the mayor appoints in April. These were just like subcommittees or whatever you want to, what term ever you want to give it to it. But I would really, really, really not want a brand new council person on the union negotiating committee in particular.
Correct.
Yeah.
The housing either, since we finally got this all together, that would be my because we've already had a little bit of this going on, so we kind of understand what's going on. So if that's great, then Steve will send that out, and then we can figure out what's going on. Alderman Stauber?
I was just going to say something to the opposite. There may be new members of the council that have experience in union negotiations, and it's a great experience for anyone that is interested in that.
She's muted.
Okay, she's muted. Yep, I don't think she wants to. Okay. So then we'll just have Steve get back to us with some explanations of both. Yes.
Yep,
yes.
and I'll put it on the agenda for, October 8th and see if you want to take action on one or both of them at that time. Be your call.
Great, thank you. Item X, appointment of Mike Myers, 2316 Madison Avenue to the Historic Preservation Commission, filling unexpired term ending April 2025.
Background check on that guy.
No action at this time. Action set for October 10th meeting. Alderman Giles?
I would actually propose, since we do have a historic preservation meeting coming up, to actually vote today on that. Suspend the rules, yes.
Because the next historic meeting is the day before the council meeting. And we've already gone 2 months without the extra person on the Historic Preservation Commission. So you'd like to suspend the rules and just vote this evening so Mike can get on to the next meeting, correct? So we have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other comments or questions? Alderman Weigel?
I'm asking out of ignorance here, but what's the urgency to get this person on the committee right now as opposed to waiting until the next one?
I think what Councilmember Giles is saying, there's maybe no urgency, no big pressing projects that they need to deal with, but just in the interest of the fact that we do have a meeting of that body scheduled for October 7th. If the body was favorable toward this nomination and didn't have any concerns or objections, they could just do it now. But, it's not like it is super urgent or something.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, I agree with Brian. I think that they've already gone a couple of meetings, and Mike, the applicant, he knows more about the history of Marshfield than anybody I think I know from this city. So he'd be an actually great candidate for that spot.
Alderman Stauber?
I agree 100% with Alderman Spiros regarding his qualifications. I do think that Alderman Riedel kind of reminds us that we should reserve the use of first reading or use that sparingly. And since there are no pressing matters for the Historic Commission, I'd be in favor of just waiting. And if Mike wants to attend the meeting, that might be helpful for him and the commission.
Alderman Varsho?
I agree with everybody that's made points there, but they only meet once a month. So if they meet the day before the next meeting, then he's not going to meet again until November. I mean, I understand what Mr. Stauber and Mr. Reigler are saying, and that we don't do this a whole lot. This is a long-time member of community service for our city, and I really don't see why we should wait to have him join a historic preservation committee. But that's why we vote.
Any other questions, comments?
What are we voting on now?
Alderman Worman?
Yeah, I kind of want to just, I want to challenge the thought process on this for a second and just say, we only have one appointee here, right? Why, is there any reason we wouldn't suspend the rules? And maybe going forward, we review that as, I mean, you know, if we have multiple appointees, I could see how we may want to take that extra time. But if we have one appointee, everybody receives the packet. I would hope everybody's doing the homework and reading the letter. I think if there's only one person, I don't know why we wouldn't suspend the rules in most cases. You do have the option to vote no. So I'm just curious, you know, and just putting it in, you know, a bug in everyone's brain to kind of think about that. If we only have one appointee, maybe it's not the worst thing to suspend the rules, unless there's a policy that I don't know about or anything, or a process that within the next 2 weeks, or I guess until our next council meeting, somebody else could submit, and then we could have another appointee. But I think in most of these cases I've seen, we get a list of appointees. There may be multiple letters to review. If there is, then you wait, you know, until the next meeting, and then you cast your vote. But if we only have one, as long as there's only one appointee, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to vote on it. And again, if you feel that they're not the right person, you'd vote no. But just maybe something we want to do for efficiency's sake, and it would probably help these out going forward. Just a thought.
Alderman Stauber?
Just being devil's advocate, and Mike's beyond approach as far as qualifications for historic issues in Marshfield. But there may be an issue before us that the members of this body don't know something, and maybe someone wants to speak during public comments for or against some action that we're about to take. And if we take immediate action tonight, we're basically saying we don't want the public input. And again, a reflection on Mike Myers, great guy, will do a fine job. He could attend the meeting if he'd like to and kind of warm up to the committees, so their work. And I don't think it's mission critical that we suspend the rules in this case.
Alderman Weigel?
And one last thing here. If the concern is that they meet once a month, they still have the ability to call a special meeting. So if they want to push this meeting out to a different date to meet in the month of October, they can. And then to just echo Mr. Stauber's point of, part of this is transparency. Part of this is giving the public a chance to opine on this. And once again, this is no reflection whatsoever on Mr. Myers, but it is a reflection on the rules. And if we are going to suspend the rules, I don't know why we're doing it. I mean, this is not NOM. There are rules. So we need to kind of go through here and obey them. So unless there's an actual reason, an urgent reason to do it, I don't see why we're doing it. But I think I've made my point, and I'll just stand down.
Alderman O'Reilly?
I'm going to echo the same thing. I will definitely vote for Mike pending some crazy thing that happens, but I don't see any issue with waiting, and I put a lot of weight into what Mr. Eigel just said, so.
Alderman Fire?
If you read all of the historic preservation minutes, you'll realize that they're in the process of re-signing the town, putting all the new signs up that they have on Main Street and all over. And any input that you would get from that person being on that committee, that helps that committee. This is not something you do every year. The signage they're gonna do on Central Avenue, every idea you can get is a new one. I've already mentioned one that they missed, and Mike is probably one of the between him and Don Schnitzler, there aren't anybody in the city of Marshfield knows more about history. So why wouldn't you want to just put them on and just get over with it? And this suspending a rule, kind of you hang a shingle on that's such a big deal. It's a big deal when it's an issue that's going to have a lot of impact on the community. But no, this is just something, putting them on the committee so we can make the next 2 meetings and get it done with it. Just prolonging it.
Alderman Spiros?
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion and a second.
Call the question.
Please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you.
So now you can go ahead and vote on them.
Correct. Now the next move is to vote for Mike Myers to be on the Historic Preservation Commission.
Wait,
We need a motion and a second.
wait, we called the question so that now we're going to vote on suspending the rules.
That's what we just did.
We just
We
did
just voted on the calling the question.
that. No,
Yeah, a call a question requires a vote.
Did we actually have a second on the call to question?
Well, if we didn't, then before the vote, that needs to be made clear.
Okay. Should we redo that? I thought we did, but maybe we didn't.
I thought I saw a second, I saw 2 yellows up there when it was called a question.
I know we did. It was.
I don't know who the second person was.
Just
Okay.
if there was confusion over what we were doing, I think we should just go back and start over.
So this is on the call to question. We now have a motion and a second on the call to question.
Okay, so please vote on calling the question. I'm completely confused.
Mr. Werman?
Yeah, no.
Yes.
And Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passes to call the question. Now we go back to the original motion, which is to vote Mike Myers in for the Historic Preservation Commission.
No, it's to suspend the
Okay.
rules.
To suspend the rules. Oh, suspend the rules.
To suspend the rules to vote him in. It's a 3-part, okay. Oh, baby, I love this, right? Okay, so now we're voting to suspend the rules, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And we have a motion by Alderman Giles and a second by Alderman Varsho. Thank you. So please vote on suspending the rules.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Yes.
That motion passed. Nope.
It did 5-4.
No,
That motion
actually, no,
fails
it did
because it
not.
needs
Nope,
2/3 of the members
it's a-
present to suspend the rules.
Oh, the 2/3.
Okay, yes. Okay, now we get to go back. Is that correct?
No,
No?
No,
we
it's
wait
not.
until next meeting.
No, it just goes on to the 2 weeks from now.
That was what it was called.
It's just the way it was laid out on the agenda.
Okay. Item Y, suggested items for further agendas. Alderman Weigel, then Alderman Werman.
Yeah, I think part of the discussion, the undercurrent of the discussion earlier today about former employees serving on a commission hinges on conflicts of interest. And I think it'd do everyone here, myself included, some good to hear exactly how that works and how it works specifically in the city of Marshfield, just so there's a better understanding of it so we can be a little bit more at ease that there won't be that conflict of interest. I don't think it's pressing, but I think it's something that we'd want to look at and just review, just to refresh everyone.
Alderman Werman?
Thank you. Yeah, I know we talked about it several times tonight. I think, I don't know how we build it into the next agenda, but having a priority list, and I don't know if we need one separately for city and for council. I'd be interested to see where we vary, right? Where the council thinks that we should focus our efforts versus where city employees, city administrator, et cetera, thinks we should focus our interests. But I do think that should be a topic of discussion. Steve, I was going to message you about this one, but I'll bring it up now. So the future agenda items, I know I had asked for reports and you've kind of been filling us in. One of the things I was hoping is we could maybe list those out in the agendas with an update, even if you just put it under staff administrator updates, because I think the problem is as council members, we say them and then we tend to forget where they are at or what we listed. So I know I threw out a bunch to you at one point, and I know Mr. Rigel has, and so on and so forth. And so even if there's no progress at this time, just to see that visually would be helpful.
Yep.
Last thing was, you were mentioning, Lois was mentioning a bunch of like anniversaries and celebrations and things like that earlier. I don't know if we put this on communications or if anybody there has any experience, but some sort of virtual kudos board or card service, something would be great. I would love for the council and everyone else at the city to be more engaged in celebrating everyone in their anniversaries, their promotions and things like that. There's got to be virtual options out there where we could all contribute rather than sending an email. I would love if we just did a virtual kudos board for someone where we could all go drop a message, something nice so that the employees feel recognized, know that we're, giving them our kudos. I think that would be a good thing to look into so that we can acknowledge them properly.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other items for future agendas? Seeing none, who would like to adjourn the meeting? Alderman, we have 10 people. Oh, excuse me, we only have 9. Okay, we're going to take Rebecca Spiros as original and Alderman Werman as the second. All those in favor, please vote.
Mr. Werman?
Yes.
Mrs. Spiros?
Woohoo, yes.
We're adjourned. Okay, I'm sorry.